again, welcome back. Here we are to continue talking about CSS. And in this class, what I'd like to talk about is the box model and flex. So using the box model and flex, we can, arrange things on the screen and determine like how big they are and kind of set the border and the space around the outside, right? So currently we're in lesson number 3 right here. Okay, so I'm going to click on lesson number 3, and here's lesson number 3. I have some review questions. So the review question here is, and this is from the previous class, right? What is Apple system? What is Blink Mac system font? And what's the difference between an M and a REM, right? And then the last question is, looking at the CSS below, can you tell me how big the H1 is in pixels and how big the paragraph is in pixels? Can you figure that out just by reading the code here? Okay, so give that a try. Let's talk about the box model. So the box model applies to any element on your page that is a block. Okay, so any block element. In general, like all the HTML tags we have, if I pull up my Zen Garden page right here, you can see it's got a bunch of tags in it, meta tag, head tag, right? But if I get into the body right here, you'll see there's the body tag, there's the div tag, section, header, H1, H2, abbreviation, right? So what are these tags? Generally, the tags come in a couple display modes, right? So the default display modes are either block or inline, okay? So blocks take up the whole row essentially. Imagine they expand to fill the width of the page and then they stack one on top of the other, okay? Inline elements are like the words in a paragraph, and they follow each other left to right, and then they wrap when they run out of space when they hit the right side of the page. Look, it's hard to tell what's an inline and what's a block just by looking at them, but div is a block, section should be a block, header is a block, H1, H2, all the headings and paragraph are block. The anchor tag is an inline tag, and the abbreviation is an inline tag. You can change the display of anything by setting its display property, right? So if I look at my Zen Garden page, you can see that the H1 goes all the way across the page. It doesn't look like it, but it does. And actually, we can kind of prove that too if I inspect it here and I hover over the H1 right there. You can see it goes all the way across. And the orange area is showing me the margin, and the blue area is the area of the H1, right? The H2 does the same thing. It's got bigger margin though, okay? Paragraph is the same thing, right? When I look at the, let me see if I can find that abbreviation, notice the abbreviation just sits inside the text here, right? It's just this little area because it's an inline element. And the same thing with these anchor tags, right? So if I go find those anchor tags here, they're down in here. Like if I hover over the anchor, you can see it doesn't expand to fill the entire page. If I wanted the anchor tag to fill the entire page, we can actually experiment with that here in the browser. I'll click on the anchor tag and you can use this style area to apply a style directly to that element. So I'll say display block. Okay, so as soon as I do display block, notice the anchor tag expands to fill the entire space, and it sits below the stuff that came before it, and all the stuff that comes after sits below it. Okay, so that's the difference between inline and block, right? Block elements also allow us to set other things. You can give them a width, you can give them padding, you can give them a border. They act like boxes on the page, right? And if you don't set the width, then the default behavior is they expand to fill the page, right? I have a sample HTML file that looks like this, and it's kind of a little playground that lets you play with the box model features. So to learn that, I'm going to go to the lessons folder here, and there's a file here called box model HTML. So you can download this and open it in your browser to take a look at it, right? And I'll look at it right here. So essentially I've got a box here, right? This gray border there, and then inside it there's an H1. So the markup here is just an H1 inside a div, and the div I think I made it like 600 by 600 or something, right? So by default this H1, I gave it a red background so we could see it, right? It expands to fill the area, right? And if I want, I can, you can type some text in here. So you can say foobar in there if you want, right? If you want to change the font size. So this is, imagine this right here is the style rules that you might put in your style sheet. So it's .box is this thing, right? And then if you want to set the font size, you can say font size of 36 pixels, right? Set the color of your font. I'm going to skip the colors, right? What if we wanted to set the width of the box? So right now, if there's no width set, the default behavior is something fills the space, right? So the default behavior is it expands, okay? If I set the width though, like if I make it 120 pixels, right, then that sets the width and it doesn't expand. Let's make it 220 pixels, right? If the height though is a little different, so instead of expanding on the height collapses, right? So it collapses around the content. So right now this is just the height right here is just the height of the content. If I set the height, like I make the height 120, now the height is 120 pixels. So if you don't set the height, then the height is only as large as the content, right? So I could set the height to 12, right? And then that's not tall enough to show the content, right? So the default behavior is things expand to fill the width, but they collapse to the height of their content, okay? Let's try something else. So I'm going to make this 200 by 200, okay? So there's my box, right? Padding. Padding goes inside the box. So the red shows the background color. It's the area of that element, okay? The 200 by 200 area. If I set the padding here, padding goes between the content and the outside of the box, right? So, or the edge of the box. So you'll see like if I set the padding to 20, I get a little more space here, but the whole box grew. So padding adds to the height and width, right? And you can set the padding different on all four sides. That would have made this input thing a little more complicated, but so I just kept it kind of simple, right? But right now if you just type one number for padding, you're going to get all four sides, right? So padding is included inside the area, right? Okay. Margin. So margin goes outside the box and allows your boxes to push away from the things that are around them. So if I put, let's say, 40 into the margin here, I said 40, right? Then you can see that I'm pushing away from the outer container, okay? And this is empty space, so it doesn't include the background color. So the content is here. The padding pushes the content away from the edge of the container, right? And then margin pushes the outside of the container away from the things around it. Okay, so there's margin. And you can set the margin different on all four sides, right? So it can be different on left, top, right, and bottom. Here we just simplified and I just set it the same for all four sides, right? So between the padding and the margin, there's a region in here that's the border. So the border, normally you can set it to nothing. I set it to 0 here, but if we give it a border, let's say 10, right? Now I have a 10 pixel border, okay? So the border goes between the padding and the margin, okay? And you can set the border different on all four sides, right? You can also give the border a style. So this is the solid style. You can do the dotted style. You can do the dashed style. You can do the double style. You can do the groove style. I like that name, groove style. I don't know that I'd ever use this border, but I like the name. You could do the ridge style. You could do the inset. You could do outset. You could do hidden, right? Well, hidden is hidden, right? But anyway, so that's the border, right? So the box model is the concept that we use to determine how something sits on the screen, okay, how a block element sits on the screen, right? And it's made up of the margin, the border, the padding, and the width and height, okay? So anyway, so that's kind of an introduction to the box model. You can even look up box model, like Google it and see what you find, and you can see some diagrams. So like our interactive diagram there is similar to what they're showing here, right? But this would be the content followed by the padding and the border. When we set the background color of an element, that's the background is included in the padding, remember, right? Okay, and then margin doesn't include the background, right? So anyway, play with the model here until you get a feel for these properties, and then we can use those properties on the Zen Garden page. So thanks for watching, and we'll continue in the next video. So spend some time, play with this and get a feel for how these properties work for now. Okay, thanks.